So we're told to write the standard form of the equation of the circle with the endpoints of diameter -1, 0, and 3, 4. So those are the 2 points that are the endpoints of the diameter. And so the circle is going to look like that. And the center is going to be the midpoint of that diameter. So we can use the midpoint formula to find out what that point is going to be. So this point is -1, 0, and this one is 3, 4. And so remember, to find the midpoint of a segment, you just add your x's and divide by 2, add your y's and divide by 2. You're taking the average of the x's, the average of the y's. So that's 2/2, which is 1, and 4/2, which is 2. So the point 1, 2, you can already see that that is the center. HK, your center, is equal to 1, 2. We know the end points of the diameter, we know the center, but we don't know the length of the radius. So we're going to have to use the distance formula to figure out what the radius is. We could do that a couple of different ways. We could find the length of the diameter by using the distance formula on the points -1, 0, and 3, 4. Take half of that for the radius, or we could just find the distance between 1, 2, the center, and 3, 4, one of the points on the circle. I think I'm going to do that one. So the radius is equal to the distance from the center, just to make sure you know what I'm getting ready to do here. Distance from the center to 3, 4. So that's going to be the square root of the difference in the x's, so 1 minus 3, quantity squared, plus the difference in the y's, 2 minus 4, quantity squared. And that's going to be the square root of 1 minus 3 is -2. Square it, you get 4. 2 minus 4 is -2. Square it, you get 4 again. So that's the square root of 8. And I'm not even going to reduce that because I don't want r anyway. I want r squared for my equation. So r squared is 8. And that is x minus h. Remember, h is 1. It's the x coordinate of the center. X minus 1, quantity squared, plus y minus the y coordinate of the center, which is 2 squared. So this is the equation of that circle. So the general form of the equation of a circle looks like this, and it's basically just what you get when you multiply out the standard form. When you square those binomials and you just square everything out, this is what you get. So write the equation of the circle in standard form, then identify the center and radius. So you can see this is in the general form. They want you to write it in the standard form. Well, how are you going to do that? Guess what? Completing the square. So you're going to have to use completing the square because you want binomials. You want perfect square binomials like in the standard form for the equation. So that completing the square keeps rearing its ugly head, but it is not that bad. So what I'm going to do is get everything looking like I want it for completing the square. My x squared plus my middle term, my 10x, and then I'm going to have to add something to that to make it a perfect square binomial. And then I've got y squared minus 6y, and I'm going to need to add something to that to make it a perfect square binomial. I'm going to move the 25 to the right side of the equation and make it -25. And remember, if you're going to add 25 and 9 to the left side of this equation, you're going to have to add it to the right side also. The 25s, the positive and negative cancel out, and you're just left with 9. All right, so remember to write x squared plus 10x plus 25 as a perfect square binomial. You're going to write that as x plus half the x coefficient. Half of 10 is 5, quantity squared. And then for your y squared minus 6y plus 9, it's going to be y minus half the x coefficient, which is 3, quantity squared. And then you've got 9 on the right side. Now you have the equation almost perfectly in standard form, which remember is x minus h, quantity squared, plus y minus k, quantity squared, is equal to r squared. So the only thing that's not exactly the same is that here you've got a plus sign and here you've got a minus sign. So you need to write x plus 5 if you want to know the center of the circle as hk. You want to write x plus 5 as x minus -5 because that way it looks right. Or you can just remember that it's going to be the opposite of whatever number is right there. So x minus -5 is the same as x plus 5, and that tells me that my x coordinate of my center is -5, and the y coordinate of my center is 3 because that's already a minus. So that's your center. And you can see that your radius is going to be 3 because r squared is 9. So your radius for this circle is 3. Okay, note, just because an equation is of the form x squared plus y squared plus ax plus by plus c equals 0 doesn't mean it is necessarily a circle. So you have to know what's going to go on if this is not. How would you know if it's a circle or not? Well, you can try to write it in standard form and find the center and the radius, and you'll figure it out. So let's do that. You've got x squared. You don't have x term. So you just got x squared, and then you have y squared minus 14y. You're going to need to figure out what to add to that to get a perfect square binomial. You've got the 49, which you're going to move over to the right side of the equation and make it negative 49. You figure out what to put in this blank. 14 divided by 2 is 7, square it, and you get 49. You got to add it to both sides of the equation. Now you can write the left side as two square binomials. X squared can be written as x minus 0 quantity squared, and then y minus 14y plus 49 can be written as y minus half the x coefficient quantity squared. The right side is 0. You have this equation in standard form, but take a look. The radius is 0. That means it is not a circle. There is no circle with a radius of 0. However, it is a point. It's the point 0, 7. Because the answer is the xy point that is 0 away from the center, 0, 7. So if it's 0 away from it, it is the point, just 0, 7. So if you get it in standard form and you end up with a 0 where your radius is supposed to be, your solution set for that equation is just a point. And that point would be what would be the center of the circle if it had a radius bigger than 0. So if you have the equation x squared plus y squared plus ax plus by plus c equals 0, and you write it in standard form, x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals c, if c turns out to be greater than 0, you've got a circle because you'll have a radius and you'll have an HK, your center, you're all good. If C turns out to be 0, then it's not a circle, it's just a point, the center, HK. If it turns out to be negative, if C, that number on the right side of the equation, turns out to be negative, then this is not a circle. In fact, there are no solutions to this equation because you've got something squared plus something squared is equal to a negative number, which never happens because perfect squares are always positive. So this would have a solution of the empty set.